Founded in 1682 by William Penn, Europeans first settled in Pennsylvania in 1637, although several tribes of indigenous people occupied the land for centuries before this. Pivotal in the French and Indian Wars, the 7 Years' War, the American Revolution, and the United States Civil War, it is no surprise that with such a rich history, our state has developed a culture that is distinctive and multifaceted. Full of legends and real-life heroes who risked everything for their beliefs, today Pennsylvania retains strong elements of folk culture developed by a combination of ideologies practiced by the varied ethnicities of original settlers, Native Americans, and shared experiences. Legends and lore passed down over centuries reveal philosophies that are as superstitious as they are religious and even scientific, resulting in a microculture found nowhere else. You are listening to Pennsylvania Life, Legends, and Lore, where we believe that behind every great story, there is a nugget of truth. In each episode, your hosts, Ethan and Holly, will attempt to uncover that truth and preserve a part of our incredible Pennsylvanian lifestyle.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to Pennsylvania Life, Legends, and Lore. I am one of your hosts, Holly.
And I'm Ethan.
And today we are going to be doing a part 1 of a 3-part series about the lost gold of Dents Run. Now, I've never heard of this. Ethan, have you?
I have not heard of this either.
Okay. So our researcher Meg always brings us fun things that even we've never heard of. So it's a learning curve for us too when we hear about these, because we have no idea what we're getting thrown into. But let's get started. So.
Yes.
Well, and I'm going to interject. I think some of the reason why we may not have heard about this is because when the story got really big, it was during the pandemic.
That's true. A lot of things that were big then took a back seat. So that makes sense.
Yeah. So we're getting to learn about the Pennsylvania version of Indiana Jones or National Treasure story that is unfolding right in our backyard.
Right. And we had no idea.
That's right. Maybe we need to stop selling insurance and go to start adventuring for gold.
Hey, people make a living off of that, so you never know. So, lost gold from the Civil War with explorers hunting for it. It sounds like it's fiction, but yeah, it's happening in the nearby Pennsylvania wilds. So, like Meg had said, in March of 2018, FBI agents and a treasure recovery service called Finders Keepers were at the Dents Run in Elk County looking for a legendary shipment of lost gold. So to start this portion off, we're going to dive deep into the background of the story of where the gold came from and how it ended up possibly in Pennsylvania. So as with most legends, there are a couple of versions that vary slightly depending on the source. So if you know about this story and we veer off a little bit from what you know, shoot us comments, let us know your thoughts and what you've heard, but we're going to go into the most common telling of the story. So in June of 1863, Confederate forces under General Robert E. Lee were headed towards the Pennsylvania town of Gettysburg. The movement ultimately led to the historic Battle of Gettysburg in south-central Pennsylvania, and at the time, Abraham Lincoln ordered a shipment of government gold to be taken by covered wagon from Wheeling, West Virginia, through Pennsylvania, headed east.
And I'm going to add in here, so if you look up the story, the Mount Zion Historical Society has the story on their website, and they list the date as early June of 1864 in their version. However, this is really unlikely because the Battle of Gettysburg concluded on July 3rd of 1863, and there wouldn't be any need to avoid the direct route to Philadelphia then. So this could be a typo. I'm guessing it's a typo. And then Wheeling, West Virginia. So West Virginia was ceded from Virginia in 1861 to join the Union. And Abraham Lincoln established West Virginia as a state officially in 1863 with Wheeling as the capital. And Wheeling was the capital from 1863 until 1870, and then it was moved to Charleston. So up until 1808, it was also the site of Fort Henry. And so it's really possible, just given the history of the area, that there could have been a gold reserve there. But I couldn't find anything specifically citing that there was a reserve or a fort there that had gold in it.
So, the wagon train consisted of 2 covered freight wagons with 4 mules each and a small ambulance wagon with it. The 2 freight wagons they each had 26 bars of gold that were painted black and weighed about 50 pounds each. So that would be why they would need 4 mules each. Mm-hmm. So today, the value of $2,008 an ounce, one of the 26 bars would be worth about $1,606,400, or a grand total for all of these 26 bars of $41,766,400.
Okay, we're going to need to stop here and take a couple-week vacation. We will be back.
That's crazy.
With the conclusion of what we found.
This is why people treasure hunt.
Exactly. Like, that's a lot of money.
Well,
one gold bar.
There's an extensive history of, like, treasure like this being lost in the Civil War because money was moved clandestinely all over the place between North and South. Mm-hmm. And when the Confederacy fell, I think it was it Johnson, who was the Confederate president at the time, he attempted to move all the Confederate money, which granted they were kind of broke at that point, but whatever was left, along with any like high standing members of Confederate society who had money, they tried to move their money out of the Capitol and like transport it to places where it'd be safe, wherever those places were. And so there's an extensive history of like lost Confederate gold as well. Like some of it just disappeared.
Well, and when you're traveling with 26 bars, so that doesn't seem like a lot. But when one bar is worth so much, like if you lose a bar, like it's not like you dropped a $5 bill on the ground and you just go about it. Like, that's a lot in one single piece of money. Like, just, it's huge.
Yeah, it's an astronomical amount. We need to go look for this and just find one bar.
That's all we're asking for.
Yeah,
just one bar.
Even half of a bar.
Right.
A quarter of a bar?
A quarter of a bar, even. Yeah.
A slice.
Right. Just a little sliver off one of them. That's all we're asking for. Mm-hmm. So, and just in case, the wagons did come equipped with a false bottom, in which the gold was placed to hide with the true cargo that they were also transporting. So the shipment was on its way to Philadelphia to be melted down and made into coins to pay the Union soldiers. And the party was made up of 3 drivers and 8 men on horseback. So it was Lieutenant James, and if I pronounce these wrong, either Meg or somebody can correct me. Lieutenant James Castleton.
Yeah.
He was born of a famous military family. He was in command, and his fighting career was stopped by an acute case of malaria and a hip wound. We had Sergeant Mike O'Rourke, an undesirable, wanted by the police for many river port brawls involving murder, was chosen for his natural talent for leading and his ability to be shrewd. Which, I mean, if you're transporting that much gold, you want somebody who's like, I'm not afraid to break the law. I'm just going to do whatever I need to do.
Yeah, and in my research, I did find a few records regarding a Castleton family from Philadelphia with a son, James, who fought in the Mexican-American War, which would have been before this, and was injured.
Okay.
So there are some supporting records for possibly him. I did find some records of a Michael O'Rourke that kind of do fit the time frame and general region, but there's not really any way for me to, it wasn't enough to conclusively know, like, oh yeah, this could be the guy.
Right.
This is definitely the guy. And then the next one that we're going to get into, there's absolutely nothing on him because all we have is the last name.
Guy probably just stole all the money.
Well, you never know.
That's one of the
It's a possibility.
Sounds like
You're getting too far ahead here.
I
Ethan.
know. Sorry, just interjecting my thoughts as we are going along through this one is he probably stole it. Moved it. It's not even in Pennsylvania anymore.
You never know. Although that would be difficult for him to move on his own.
Well,
without.
we'll get into
And if
I know we're
find-
getting
they
into
find-
more later on, but just
Well,
it's
if they
intriguing.
find the things like the wagons, the mules, again, I'm getting ahead of ourselves. If they find that kind of stuff, how would he have transported multiple? Maybe he only took one. You only need one.
You don't really need a ton, but if you were going to be greedy and try to take a bunch, there's
Right.
no way you'd maneuver that landscape with a whole bunch of gold on you, physically.
So
But maybe he. Never mind.
maybe
I'm getting too. Maybe I'm getting too far ahead.
All right, Ethan, settle down. We'll get there.
I want $41 million. Come on. I need to know where it is.
Settle. All right, back on track here. So the last individual was, like Meg said, we only have his last name, was Connors. And he was the only other one that was identified. And he was an unfriendly and sullen gentleman and had also been wounded in combat and assigned to limited service. And again, we don't have a whole lot to back that up, but that's what we know. So, the men were instructed to take a roundabout route through the north central part of Pennsylvania, going as far as Williamsport to avoid the enemy. Some sources describe the route as headed for Round Island, which is located between what is now Benezet and Lock Haven, and makes sense as a stop along the route. So the crew followed the old Clarin River Trail for several days and eventually camped in a clearing near Ridgeway. And while they avoided the Confederate infiltrators, the party did not evade illness. So Lieutenant Castleton is said to have come down with typhoid fever, and then arriving in the town of Ridgeway, Castleton tried, unsuccessfully, to buy some Peruvian bark or quinine for his fever. So the townspeople did not appreciate the arrival of the wagon train, and in a tavern, Castleton and O'Rourke were accused of being drafters there to recruit men for duty. A brawl ensued, and the group felt fortunate enough to be able to leave that town with their lives.
So can I just interject here? Because I found this kind of interesting, and it sort of ties into, some of the things I've chuckled about being, from upstate New York with the snow here, how Pennsylvanians kind of feel like they're Southerners. We, I think, often forget that although Pennsylvania was in the Union, it was right on the line, split between North and South. So literally all through the state, you really did have brothers fighting brothers.
Right.
And even in northern Pennsylvania, people were not a huge fan of the war because they just didn't see why, one, they should be bothered. A lot of them are remote enough that it was like, it's my land, I don't want anything to do with this. I just want to be free to do my thing. Or, they just felt a lot of them felt like they were pushed to one side or another because that's how the state went. So even though you were in a union state, not everyone in the state had the same sentiments as the state went. So just to consider that, because it's not just Confederate soldiers they had to worry about, it's also sympathizers. I get really excited about history.
And that's why we keep Meg in here, because she knows more about it, and we want somebody interjecting with those little tidbits for you. So early the next day, the group carefully skirted the town, following a road heading east, possibly the present-day Route 120, arriving in St. Mary's 2 days later. And here they found a map of the Wild Cat Country, made in 1842 by surveyors, that showed a possible road branching to the south about 10 miles east of St. Mary's and 1 mile west of the village of Truman, which may or may not have been in existence at that time. So today, this road is a little bit more than a jeep trail. It crosses 2 mountains with elevations of 2,000 feet, with the west branch of Hicks Run in between. This road joins an unimproved dirt road, just over the summit of the second mountain and branches off into 3 directions. Each branch eventually brings you to the Cinnamohoning Creek at different points. The road the soldiers supposedly took would have brought them to Hicks Place, which is currently the town of Driftwood on the same river. So the team was headed to a point where the Cinemahoning connects with the west branch of the Susquehanna, and they planned to float the gold down the Susquehanna to Harrisburg and onward. The branch offs from the team's route were not well marked and not present on their map. Unfortunately, they became hopelessly lost in the PA wilds. So the wagon party was last seen in the town of St. Mary's.
And I'm going to interject here again. So, again, if you go to the Mount Zion Historical Society, their documents show that during the trek, after leaving St. Mary's, the party faced disease and attacks by wild animals and, rattlesnakes and copperheads, and that basically the majority of the team was dead or dying at this point, and that quarrels started breaking out between surviving members of the party, and the team split up at this point to get help for Lieutenant Castleton, who was too ill to travel any further. Their version of the story say that Connors left for help, and that Castleton, O'Rourke, and 4 other men who were left in the party began transferring the gold to pack sacks that they made up from the canvas wagon covers so that the mules could reach their destination faster. So they were losing the wagons, transferring the gold directly onto the mules, and planning to go just with the mules the rest of the way.
I feel like that puts them a little bit more at risk.
Yeah. And then, and you think about it, they would have had to have weaponry in some of the... You wouldn't transport that gold with just weaponry on you.
Right.
You'd have to have weaponry in some of those wagons, so they'd have to have left that too. And then their version also said that Connors reported later, when he left the party, that O'Rourke and Castleton were arguing over whether to bury part of the gold because they realized they couldn't take it all on the mules. Or to try to carry it all. It is also noted in their version that Lieutenant Castleton had a logbook, but they don't have this logbook, and there's no official documentation of this logbook. So they're saying a lot of these details that they have that maybe the other versions don't come from this logbook, but they don't have the logbook.
Okay.
They don't know where it is, so...
That's not helpful.
No. So we don't really know if that's actually factual.
Right.
Some of those details are factual, or if they're just embellishments that happen over time.
Right. Because that happens. So, Connors was the only survivor. He eventually made it into Lock Haven. He was sick and dehydrated when he arrived. He was nursed back to health and then stayed in Lock Haven until Army officials showed up. He was interrogated by the military, and Connor said the lieutenant, so that's Lieutenant Castleton, had died of fever, and there was a fight, but he couldn't remember anything after that.
Sure.
And I will also say here, there's another, some of the accounts that you'll read of this say that Connors actually went back to St. Mary's, and that's where all this happened, that he was interrogated in St. Mary's. Also, there are variations on the time frame. Some say that he showed up a month later, others say 2 months, but it seems like the majority of the versions say he showed up in Lock Haven between a month and to 2 months later.
Right. It's surprising that he survived. Like, he was by himself. Like, I'm surprised he was able to make it anywhere. Okay, Ethan's got a theory. Go ahead.
I'm not saying that I don't have a theory. What people need to remember is, like, today we think, oh, there's no way, like, with all the technology and all of this stuff, like, there's no way someone would get away with just stealing all of that gold so easily. But back then, there was no cell phones, there was no highways. It's not like they were just passing horse and buggies left and right. And once they're out in the middle of the Pennsylvania woods, they could easily just, I don't know, shoot each other or say, hey, you're going to get this amount of gold, you're going to get this amount of gold.
You've got sketchy people on the
transporting
team too.
High value money, and what's to say they just didn't say, hey,
that's a risk you have to take.
You're now John Smith, and see ya. And you died.
That's actually, like, kind of one of the conspiracy theories, because you're talking about the head was, yes, a decorated military official who had an extensive like military family that were, you know, held in high regard. But he had been wounded. His fighting days were over, and he was a little bitter about that, according to most accounts.
Well, and he was ill.
And he was ill.
Right.
Right. And so
it wouldn't be difficult for everybody else to be like, well, we don't really need this guy anymore.
And then
happened in history. Watch The Revenant, read the book, read the history about it. Pretty much the same thing.
And the other guy was known to be a scoundrel, and he was picked specifically because he was shrewd and he was kind of a scoundrel. And then Connors wasn't really, from what we have documented, he wasn't really like an awesome dude either.
Upstanding citizen.
Right.
Right. So it's a possibility. You could just be like, well, I don't know what happened to those guys.
Yeah.
And nobody would know any different or have proof of anything different.
They got lost. Air quotes.
Yeah.
I mean...
Well, and he can say whatever he wants. He's the only person there. He can say, well, yeah, they started fighting. They said, well, maybe we're going to bury it. Maybe we'll keep going with it. Maybe this, maybe that. I don't know. And that's all that anybody has to go on.
Mm-hmm. And let's face it, with Pennsylvania being neutral-ish, what's a better state to say, hey, we have all this gold in Pennsylvania and we want to escape with it, so let's just change our names and maybe people won't tell us because some of the people in Pennsylvania are on the fence on, one, which side to be on, and two, whether we really should, like, is it worth being involved? So what's easier to do except for say, hey, oh, I'm just a really wealthy person minding my own business and I don't really care what goes on here, just being neutral.
Yeah, because then you have to figure, what are they going to do with the gold bars? You can't just go up and be like, here's a gold bar. Like,
I found this. No.
So you could have all the wealth in the gold bars, but you can't use it.
Correct.
You can melt it down into other
Could you do
things.
that yourself, though?
I don't know.
Like,
I don't
maybe.
know how. I mean, I could probably look up what the melting temperature of gold is.
Maybe.
But, I mean,
but like you'd probably have to have certain like stamps and things like that to make it look like.
And what if they were spies? Ooh, interesting.
now what
Oh,
you're
boy.
saying is true. However, the detection skills for
Right.
fraudulent currency was not there
Right.
Correct.
as it used to be. So you could have a really good artist create a mold for you that looked
But
like
then you have to
coin.
involve other people.
Right. So it's just how many people do you want to involve?
I am not, maybe, my thought is maybe not that extreme, but it wouldn't
So
surprise...
you had the idea, and then Meg and I went down a rabbit hole
Yeah.
with it.
Or maybe they buried it and said, hey, we're going to wait for things to cool down and we know where it is. We'll come
True.
back later.
True.
Right.
And then when there's going to be less questions asked.
True. That's entirely possible.
Yeah. They stole it. Bunch of thieves.
It's possible. So 10 days after Connors was interrogated, he took a rescue party from Lock Haven to the team's last known camp, but they only found the abandoned wagons. So that kind of tracks to him saying they were debating leaving the wagons and just taking the mules with the gold. So they at least found the wagons. So it was apparent that the group had split up there, and there were several trails to the southwest, and the rescue party had searched for several days before returning to Lock Haven. In a court of inquiry held in Clearfield, Pennsylvania, they charged Castleton and O'Rourke with treason and theft, and the charges were dropped, though, pending further investigation, as Castleton's family had much influence in high army circles. So they were trying to charge them even though they weren't around. So they were going clearly off of whatever Connors had said, because they didn't have any other proof other than the fact that they found wagons but found nobody else.
Right.
And just a side note, I do mention this in another part of this, but there is no record in the Clearfield Historical Society, any of the judicial records, anything of this court of inquiry.
Okay.
So some people say, well, everything at that time was really scattered because of the state that we were all in.
True.
But the flip side of that is things are pretty well documented in the Civil War. And Civil War historians are pretty meticulous people. So if it existed, they probably would have found it.
True. So it's up in the air. Could be, could not. Who knows?
Thieves.
So you would have charged them if they were alive or whatever.
I mean, putting myself in that time.
Mm-hmm.
If there's no...
Ethan would have gone around, you're dead, you're dead, you're dead. Here's the gold. See ya.
Also,
No.
you have to still worry about Indians,
Not a criminal.
Native Americans during this time too. So there was a thought that maybe Native Americans
That's true.
came in and took off with.
No, I'm saying it seems a little suspicious if there's no physical bodies.
I was just going to say that to Meg's point. Like, it's not like they found...
Right. If he said the guy comes back and says everybody's dead, well, shouldn't he know where everybody died?
He didn't say everybody's dead. He says
Oh no,
he
it says the
doesn't
only.
know.
Sorry, he doesn't know.
Some of them, it is like implied that some of the party died, but there was enough left.
Right.
But they were all ailing. Like they were dealing with typhoid and malaria and like
But
who knows what.
Did they find any bodies?
Well, keep.
Okay. All right. We're getting there.
we're
Sorry.
getting there.
All right.
We're putting the cart before the horse.
It's a wagon before the mule.
Whatever.
Stick to the script. So later, Connors would get drunk and claim that he knows everything that happened and exactly where the gold was. So, still suspicious, the War Department hired the Pinkerton Detective Agency to search for the gold with utmost secrecy. And so they did not want the Native American or civilians searching for the gold. So they were trying to keep it all very discreet as they tried to find any remnants of this gold. So several teams of Pinkertons posed as prospectors and lumbermen in the area, alert for any signs of sudden wealth and ask discreet questions. Those searches were conducted in the area from Lock Haven to the Driftwood Branch to the Benezet branch of the Cinnamahoning Creek as far west as St. Mary's. So in the summer of 1865, Donovan and Dugan were detectives in the Pinkerton Agency found 2.5 bars of gold buried under a pine stump about 4 miles south of where the wagons were abandoned. This indicated that the treasure had been stolen and divided. So, in 1871, 8 years later, when the search ended, these same detectives retired from the agency and built a cabin north of Benezet on Trout Run. So occasionally they would search on their own for the treasure, which, why wouldn't you? And in 1866, a pair of the mules was found by other Pinkerton men, and the mules were still carrying the Army brand and were in possession of an old man in Chase Run. He said that he had found them wandering in the woods. So he wasn't part of the original group. He just happened to find these mule.
Mm-hmm.
Then in 1876, while the Elk Cameron boundary was being resurveyed, several skeletons were found. Now,
That's where the bodies come in.
that's what, but do they know who they were?
That's the thing. You don't know if that was a Native American burial ground. You don't know if that was just some other.
Right, like just
Group of
because they found
people
skeletons doesn't
who-
mean that.
Can't they run DNA? Well, they don't have the skeletons anymore, I'm guessing.
There is
I don't
no
know.
record
Mhm.
of skeletons ever being found.
Hmm.
So,
Because I say with today's technology, they should just be able to run DNA to
So-
find out what they're.
all of the legends, every single version you read of this legend will say that they found skeletons when the Elk and Cameron County line was drawn and resurveyed, and they found these skeletons. But there isn't actually any historical record of this.
Okay.
Not even in a newspaper.
I feel like it was just like, well, here's some bodies that people died in the woods.
I mean, and
like
it could be one of two things. Either they really worked at keeping this very, very quiet.
right.
Or you gotta figure you're back in the times when Pennsylvania was still kind of the Wild West.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe people stumbled across bones like that in
Right.
the woods all the time and
Right.
didn't really think about it.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Could just be this group of people got lost and
you know,
You know,
think
this
about
is
it.
their end.
When people died traveling out west, what happened? You just
let
buried
them there.
You left
Yeah.
them there. You buried them where they were.
Right. Right.
So
It's not worth taking them along. It's just extra.
and they're gonna
Bleak.
stink.
That's true too. That's true too. So the survey crew found the bones from 3 to 5 human skeletons scattered around near a spring at the head of Bell's branch of Dents Run, approximately 7 miles from where the wagons had been abandoned. So all of this wasn't too terribly far from where the mules were found, and where the skeletons were found wasn't far from where the wagons were found. So, and of course we know the remaining gold has not been found. So, now we're going to jump up, unless, do you have any more insight that you want into the background story?
No. No, it might take a little time to get part 2 and 3 out. I need to take a vacation, and I'm going to suddenly just start hiking.
Okay. Well, we're going to stick within like a 10-mile radius of wherever these specific location of where these wagons were found, because it doesn't seem like people got very far.
Which
Doesn't.
Could be huge.
hints at an altercation of some point. Like, even if there were actually bones and they were only 7 miles from where the wagons were found, they didn't make it far before somebody killed them.
Right. Before something happened.
Because
yeah.
they didn't all just drop dead of whatever they were dealing with.
In that spot, right.
In that spot.
Right.
And
Right. Well, and that's the thing with, if you had the skeletons, you could kind of see, like, was there marks on the bones, like if somebody was, like, stabbed, or if somebody was shot, or, you know, different things, but we don't have that information, unfortunately.
you seem so depressed that we don't have that information.
Well, it's like you want to know, like, now we're digging into it, and now I'm like, I need to know all of the answers. Leaving things up in the air and just out there. Just
Telling you what happened. They shot each other and left with the gold. People weren't as honest back.
Wait till we get to part 2 and 3. Your thoughts might change. Just saying. I
We'll
started
see.
out all excited about there actually being gold here, and now I'm like, I don't know.
Currently, this sounds like the good, bad, and the ugly, and the gold's marked in the grave unknown somewhere around the planet, and
You never know.
we're just waiting for someone to find it.
Waiting for you to find it.
That's right.
All right. So now we're going to jump forward to 2018. So this is the Finders Keepers. This is their story. The lost shipment of gold has been a mystery that the Finders Keepers, which is the Treasury Recovery Company, has been eager to solve, which now I want to be part of the Finders Keepers. So, father and son Dennis and Kim Parada, who are the owners of Finders Keepers, have been working on the project for years. So in 2012, they believed that they had figured out the location of the gold. The area that their sophisticated detector has registered a hunk of metal that they suspected was the gold of lore was on state land. So as a result, federal law prevented them from digging there for the gold. The law regarding buried treasure can be somewhat convoluted, and despite the company name, there is never a guarantee that the finder will get to keep what they find, which that's a giant bummer.
Yeah, so, and the thing that is...
Sounds like they were the loser weepers.
Oh
my gosh.
So the thing that also made this more complicated, and we talk about it more later, but it's the place where their metal detector went crazy is on state land. It's also game land. And it's technically, if it is the gold, or was the gold, it's federal gold.
You got a whole bunch of hands in the pot.
So there would be totally a turf war.
Right.
And then you have the treasure recovery company in the mix.
Right.
Because,
Which they're probably way on the low on the totem pole at that point.
right, because of the next piece gets into that.
Huever, the federal government reportedly will give the finder 10%, and then the finder will most likely have to pay tax on that. So, huge bummer. Huge bummer.
Is it though? Because
I mean, it's still a lot.
$41 million, so they're still getting
$4 million.
Thank you.
Okay, so if you found $41 million and then you get how much?
$4 million.
Little
Yeah. Yes.
Like-
yes. What are you going to
little over
say?
$4 million.
But then you have to pay tax on it.
Yeah, that's the dumb part.
So then you're gonna get like what? Maybe 2 million. Like you could have had 41 million, and then you end up with maybe 1 or
I just
2.
say keep your mouth shut and dig the hole.
Right, right. Just be like, hey, I found this. Like, put the hole back. Like, put the dirt back.
But that gets back to my. That
like,
gets back to my
just
now.
hang on to it for a while until people aren't suspicious that there's a hole in the ground.
But now that gets back to the. Now with today's technology and everything, you're probably not going to be able to keep that quiet very long and actually use the wealth. Because
Well, no, you would definitely have to just hang on to it and be like,
never say a word. So is it worth to have 41 million unusable go to jail dollars, or have
why would you go to jail? Well, I guess because you dug it up.
Well,
or
But-
you could have $4 million taxed and you get to live your life happy.
All right, well, you'd have to weigh those
unimprisoned.
pros and cons while
Well-
you're standing there waiting to see
Well,
if you want to
it
dig
appears
a hole.
we know what your pros are. Take the
Or
$41
you
million.
just wait it out.
But- or
You
they
just
could've-
wait it out and put it somewhere on your property,
And then be like, hey, I
and then
found
be
this.
like, "Hey, I found this."
This gold is just ended up in Allen. It just ended up here
So
in
they-
central Pennsylvania, where it was
Apparently,
never
looks
suspected
like
to be.
They live remotely enough. I think that from what I saw, this is not far from where their actual
Okay,
headquarters or house is. So,
okay.
like, I mean,
But it could also be they could have dug on state lands. It could have not been gold. And
Right.
then they're just in
and
deep trouble for that. And they don't
Outwater.
even have any.
I think I'd take the
Thing to
10.
take for
I
it.
think I'd take the 10%, and you also have to remember. Yeah, I think I'd take the 10%.
these troop guys have no sense of adventure.
You're
No.
going to
They
be.
always play
Okay,
safe.
so when I find something with a metal detector, I'm saying, okay, Ethan, there's nothing really there, and I'm gonna call Meg, and then we're gonna go out.
And then when
And-
you go to jail,
and if we get caught, you're deaf and I don't speak English.
See, we have a plan. We're ready to go.
and you just put it on a podcast that's going to be broadcast to everybody that's there for the record for the future.
Well, and then if something happens, Meg and I go to jail. You and Josh are just gonna be two dads.
Innocent,
with
innocent,
two
we're
dads with
innocent.
4 kids.
I had a severe head injury. I didn't remember that I had a
But the other thing too is, if these people did find it, okay, so they get 10%, but then they're also now forever the people who found the gold. So it's not like they're just not, they're getting that deal and hey, nothing
Right,
else
they're
is
gonna
going
be on TV. They can write
right.
books. They can have all sorts of different.
So are they
media
really going to
avenues.
only make $2 million after taxes? No.
Maybe.
No.
So, but and then the other side of this is because even though, as we'll find out, the FBI the federal government gets involved, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you still have the fact that it's on state land and game land. So there isn't to say that yes, you have $41 million, but now you're going to have a legal tete-to-tete with federal government, state government, and the game commission, who are all going to say we have a claim to this gold.
Right.
And then after that
You're never
is
gonna
worked
see a
out-
penny of that.
after
Yeah.
that is worked out, that's when Finders Keeper gets their 10% of whatever's left.
Right.
Right. But still,
Just saying.
It's a good point, though.
It's easier to bury bodies. Just kidding.
So we all know what the end result would have been if Meg was on this trip back then. All right. In January of 2018, that is when the Paradas reached out to the FBI with their evidence and asked for their assistance. So by March 14th of 2018, the FBI and the Pennsylvania Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, they were on the scene in Elk County along with the Finders Keepers and several news organizations. We'll jump now into, that was Finders Keepers. Now we're going to jump into the FBI and their search. The FBI had sent down their own researchers to evaluate the area in question, and they had also hired geophysical consulting firm, it's called EnviroScan, to help survey the hilltop site. So EnviroScan's gravimeter also indicated a large metallic mass with the density of gold, which, according to Warren Gettler, author of Rebel Gold, a book exploring legends of buried Civil War era caches of gold and silver. So Gettler worked closely with the Paradas and with the FBI, and an FBI agent told them that the mass found was 7 to 9 tons, and that much gold would be worth hundreds of millions of dollars today. And assuming that it was there, that much gold would certainly touch off a legal fight, which we already talked about, over how to divvy up the spoils. So it's worth noting that according to Google, tungsten is the only other metal with similar density to gold. So it's not even to say that it was gold. It could have been something else.
Mm-hmm.
The only things, basically, that would have set off the gravimeter, that, like, if it's working properly, which they're saying everything was done according to spec, everything was up to par, all of that. The only two things that would have read as the same density as gold is gold or tungsten.
Okay. So that'd be a real bummer.
Tungsten, and we get into this later because it's part of the conspiracy theory, but tungsten is used in like filaments and electrodes and it's things like that. So techie stuff.
Yeah. So not quite as exciting as finding gold.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to get into a little bit of a conspiracy at this point. Of the Parada family claims that they had an agreement with the FBI to be able to observe the excavations. But of course we all know that probably would never have gone to fly. So, however, on the day of the dig, the FBI officers instead confined them to their car. So they were finally escorted to the dig site at the end of the second day, where they saw a huge empty hole.
Mm-hmm.
That would be such a bummer.
Mm-hmm.
So the FBI claims that they didn't find anything, but the Paradas remained convinced that the FBI uncovered something there. So the Parada family suspects that the FBI retrieved the gold in the middle of the night and then showed the treasure hunters an empty hole in the afternoon of the second day. They are so convinced that the FBI is hiding something that they have officially sued the FBI for access to their records regarding the dig.
And this is why it's still a story today, because they're still
right
in a lawsuit with the FBI.
Right, that was only 2018.
Mm-hmm. And it's ongoing, the lawsuit.
The FBI found the gold, let's face it.
I mean,
the things that they know that we don't know is probably... would blow our minds.
Weren't they the ones that, or maybe it was the government, I don't remember, but I forget, back in like the 60s or 70s, the military was testing I think the plane's called the SR-71 Blackbird. It's a plane that goes way, 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 way high, does surveillance, but like super undetectable, and people, I think it blew up or something. Something happened with it, and like one of the engines fell and landed in Pennsylvania somewhere, and everybody's like, oh, it was a UFO, and they made this whole big stink out of it, and like there's people who saw the government come in, put this thing on a trailer, and take it out.
It's never seen of again, never spoken of again.
No, they just said it was nothing. I forget what they said.